Welcome to a bonus episode of the Mystical Times blog podcast, Summer Chills 2025. Michelle Eve is taking a break this month, but has put together two very spooky encounters that, no matter how hot the summer sun gets, these encounters will give you the chills.
Now you see him, now you don't. The A38 is a road that runs from Derby all the way to Cornwall, and there is a 10-mile section of the road in the county of Somerset that's had many sightings of a hitchhiker who would always be described as a middle-aged man wearing a long light-coloured overcoat whilst holding a torch downwards. He would sometimes appear in the middle of the road so that when a lone driver would see him, they would swerve so not to hit him, but the man was nowhere to be seen when the driver stopped their car and checked their mirrors. On one occasion, it was a motorcyclist who, upon seeing the figure in the road, swerved too abruptly, fell off and broke a limb. These incidents were reported to a local Somerset newspaper in the early 1970s, and a man, a Mr. Unsworth, contacted the newspaper to tell of his strange encounters with this phantom hitchhiker that had occurred in the 1950s. Mr. Unsworth had been a lorry driver, and the A38 was a road he regularly drove on in the early hours of the morning. He was rather embarrassed to tell of his experiences, but felt he needed to. It was around 3 a.m. and Mr. Unsworth was driving back to his depot on the A38. The weather that morning was wet and damp when Mr. Unsworth saw a man trying to flag down a lift. This man looked soaked to the bone as his longish greyish hair was dripping with water. He was wearing a light-coloured overcoat and carrying a torch, so Mr. Unsworth saw him and stopped his lorry to offer this man a lift. The hitchhiker spoke with a well-educated accent and asked Mr. Unsworth to drop him off by a bridge, which was around 4 miles away. As they travelled along, the hitchhiker began talking about accidents that had happened at this bridge. He spoke about these gruesome accidents in a gleeful tone, and Mr. Unsworth was glad when the hitchhiker finally got out the lorry. It was several days later when Mr. Unsworth was travelling on the A38 at 3 a.m. on a wet and cold morning. As he approached a stretch of road where he had previously picked up the hitchhiker, he was shocked to see the man again, trying to flag down a lift. For whatever reason, Mr. Unsworth gave this man a lift to the same bridge as the first time. Yet again, this man held the same strange conversation about accidents at the bridge and spoke about it in the same gleeful tone. This was to happen a third time, and Mr. Unsworth felt the man was mentally disturbed due to hitchhiking in such foul weather in the early hours of the morning, and to talk about such harrowing accidents. He was relieved not to see the figure again in the following months. That was until an early, murky and rainy morning in November. Mr. Unsworth gave him yet another lift. Mr. Unsworth felt this was becoming rather odd, but this time the hitchhiker asked if Mr. Unsworth could wait at the bridge for him, as he had a few things he needed to collect and wanted to travel a few miles further after these items had been collected. So Mr. Unsworth let out the hitchhiker and waited. He waited a good while, but the hitchhiker hadn't returned, so Mr. Unsworth decided to leave. He had gone 3 miles up the A38 when, all of a sudden, he saw the man he had dropped off at the bridge. There was no mistaking his overcoat, hair and torch. Mr. Unsworth thought it would have been impossible for the man to cover the 3-mile distance on foot alone, and he had not seen any other cars on the road since dropping the hitchhiker off. Mr. Unsworth gave this man a wide berth, and as he did so, the man jumped right in front of the lorry, so the lorry had to swerve, and Mr. Unsworth managed to keep his lorry under control. He stopped the lorry and got out. What he saw was the figure of the hitchhiker on the road, shaking his fists and swearing out loud. Mr. Unsworth quickly got back in his lorry, feeling the need for some sort of normality, as this situation didn't make any sense. Fortunately, Mr. Unsworth was never to see this hitchhiker again. The A38 has had many fatal accidents over the years, so just who is this phantom hitchhiker? Just be extra careful if you ever find yourself driving down a lonely stretch of the A38 in Somerset in the dark. It was in the mid-1980s when Derek and Miranda were asked to dog and house sit for their friends. Their friends lived in a rather lovely historic house, Georgian and Jacobean in style, but built over a previous building so that the cellars were Elizabethan. The large back garden still housed a grotto, where a hermit was said to have lived in the 12th century. Derek and Miranda were living in a small cottage, so jumped at the chance to live somewhere more palatial. Both were dog lovers, but lacked space for their own pet dog, so it was a chance to live differently for a couple of months, and it wasn't long until they moved in and took responsibility for the house and 2 dogs. It was during the summer, so they spent many days and evenings with the dogs outside in the garden. It was Derek who first noticed a change in the atmosphere inside the house. He felt watched, and whatever was watching him felt resentful. Despite it being hot outside, the house, in certain areas, felt cold, colder than what was expected. Both Derek and Miranda felt as though they were being silly in feeling this way and tried to pay it no attention, but it was when they started to ignore it, strange things started to occur. If they had been out for the evening, they would come back and find the interior lights had been switched on. Both had been away at work during the day, and they hadn't switched any lights on as there had been no need. This happened several times. Each time they would go round and switch the lights off. Whatever was causing this to happen wasn't best pleased in the nonchalant way in which the couple dealt with the lights. It was then that when they returned home after work, the radio would be blaring out. Again, they were certain that no radio would have been left on, as either one would have heard it before leaving the house. One particular weekend morning, Miranda decided to stay in bed whilst Derek attended to the dogs. She was thinking of what plans they had for the weekend, when suddenly the handle of the closed bedroom door started to rattle, as though someone was trying to open the door. Miranda screamed out loud, and Derek came running up. He opened the door with ease, and Miranda told him why she had screamed. They tried to think of a reasonable explanation as to why the handle had rattled, and decided it may have been a large vehicle going past, and the vibration had caused it to rattle. It was later that week that both were sitting on the sofa watching TV with the dogs when the door of the living room flung itself open. It was flung so hard that it banged against the wall, and an ornament fell off a wooden shelf. The dogs reacted to the event by barking aggressively towards the door. They managed to calm the dogs down and again tried to rationalize what had happened. Miranda said she couldn't and no longer wanted to talk about it. "Let's just ignore it," she said. "It hasn't hurt us, just shocked us and the dogs a bit." Whatever was causing these things to happen seemed to take what Miranda said as a challenge. It started just a few days later. They were in the kitchen, washing and drying the evening saucepans and plates. Both felt something brush up against them as it went past. It also swung the hanging saucepans too. They later saw a large bag of embroidery threads being shaken and moved by invisible hands. They couldn't ignore the oppressive feeling of the house anymore, and were counting the days till their friends would come back so they could go back to their small but quiet cottage. They had had 3 more nights left, so that night they decided to go to bed earlier than normal, as the house felt particularly unpleasant. They both fell asleep but kept waking up, and it was around 3 a.m. in the morning when Derek noticed the sounds of the dogs barking and what sounded like water. He realised that the sink in the ensuite had both taps turned on fully, So he got out of bed, turned off the taps, and went downstairs to calm the dogs down. Once he calmed them down, he went back to bed. As soon as he switched off his bedside light, the sound of water gushing from the taps was heard again. So again he got out of bed and then switched the taps off. This was also to happen on the last 2 nights as well. When their friends come back to the house, Derek and Miranda told them of what had been happening. The friends said that when their son had been small, he would often talk of the kind lady, all dressed in black, who would comfort him if he woke up in the early hours of the morning. They also said that many of their visitors had also seen black cloaked figures walking around the house and garden, but they had never seen these figures. According to local legend, there is said to be an old tunnel or passage that leads from the original building to the local monastery. The monks that lived in this monastery had been Benedictines, who were sometimes known as black monks. No more reports have come from this house. Whether that's because nothing further has happened, or whoever lives there prefers to ignore this poltergeist behaviour, we don't know.
That's all for this bonus episode. Michelle Eve will be back on the 25th of July for episode 32, which is called Supernatural Somerset. Till next time.